Welcome to another adventure here on Discover Israel, and we're continuing our journey from Jaffa to Jerusalem on the off-beaten roads. We're here right now in the center of the city of Lod, and we're continuing to explore this city. And right now what you can see behind me and a little bit to the sides are the ancient antiquities of the city of Lod. Now when I say ancient antiquities, these are actually walls from the Crusader period. Before that, as we discovered, the city was actually towards the edge of the modern day city today, which is towards the Ayalon. So let's come and explore this place, because right here behind me is actually the church of St. George. Wonder what St. George is about? Let's take a look. Well, St. George, who was he? And why is there a church in the middle of this Jewish town? Well, the story goes like this. St. George, or George as he was known, was born to his mother and his father here in Lydia, or Lod as it would be. And George grew up in his family. His family was a nobility. His father was actually a Roman soldier, a high-ranking officer actually. And as their son grew up, he did what every other young man in the Roman Empire would do at that time, was to join the Roman army. His father, being a leading officer, gave him a great chance to be promoted and advanced in rank very fast. George joins the army. His father had died by this time, and his mother had moved back to Syria. And he moves up in rank. In fact, there's actually stories of George accompanying Constantine on his journeys around England and such. So what happened? How did George become St. George the Martyr? Well, George, as we know, moved up in rank, became the top of his class. He actually became one of the highest officials in the Roman army, legatus, which is basically an official over a legion of men. During this time, the Roman Empire went through a change of hands, and Diocletian took over the government of the Roman Empire. Diocletian made a new statement. He wasn't a Christian, and he says, listen, all those who are Christians in the military, they need to give up their status, they will be demoted in rank, and they will also need to give away all their belongings. So what happened was that George decided to give away all his belongings to the poor people of his town, and he went before Diocletian and said, listen, I'm a believer, I cannot give up my faith, I cannot stop professing to be a Christian, so do with me as you please. Diocletian begged him and said, listen, you cannot do this, we can't lose you, you're a great commander and you're amazing at your job. Just give up your faith. I'll pay you anything you want. He wanted to give him lands, women, houses, but nothing could convince George to do this. Instead, George says, listen, you're just wasting your time. Just do with me as you think. So Diocletian says, listen, there's nothing that I can do but to throw you into prison, and the next day you will be executed. Even in prison, Diocletian sent there a woman so that she could sit with him and try to convince him and maybe even sleep with him in order to convince him to give up his Christian faith. George stood steadfast by his faith, and instead he witnessed to this woman and she became a Christian. At the end of the day, the next day in Nicomedia, on the city walls, George was beheaded in front of the whole city. His body was later brought here to the city of Lod, or Lida, and he was buried here. Later, when the Crusaders came to the city of Lod and they built the city up, they commemorated this church in his memory around his tomb. You know, I often wonder, what would I do in that situation? But even before we get to that situation of having to give our life for our faith, I wonder each day what decisions I make and if my decisions glorify the Lord. And so I offer you that question. Do you ask yourself on a continual basis, what I'm doing, does this bring glory to the Lord, to His name? Or what I'm doing, is this not bringing glory to the Most High? My prayer is, and my hope is, that we would always strive to bring glory to God. Whether it is giving our life or giving to the poor, that God would always be glorified and it wouldn't be us in the end. I'm really excited about this series, and I hope that you join us next time as we continue on our journey from Jaffa to Jerusalem on Discover Israel. Shalom.